Welcome to Bird Brain. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I have got my guest, Jon Carter. Jon, could you please introduce yourself to my listeners and tell them what it is that made you say yes to being on Bird Brain?
Well, hello there for a start. Hi. Well, I mean, to be honest, I work for the British Trust for Ornithology. I'm a birder. I've been a birder all my life. I love communicating. I love chatting to people about birds and about nature generally and trying to inspire them. That's what I've done for many years in various roles. And I just thought it was a really, really nice way of communicating about birds in a different way. We often are very we look at things very subjectively often, but the idea of kind of taking something slightly different and making it kind of accessible to more people. I just think it sounds really good fun, quite frankly.
Oh, thank you. I have obviously feel the same way, but that's my podcast, so I'm going to feel that way. For my listeners, obviously, a lot of them are going to know what the BTO does. But if they don't, and if they're not used to that acronym as well, can you please just break it down?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the BTO's been around for almost 100 years. I mean, we're an established organisation that deals mainly with science. We collate the data. We use thousands of very keen and active volunteers who collect the data, whether it's breeding bird surveys or wetland bird surveys or nest record schemes or one of the many things we have going on. And then they provide us with all this incredible information. And then our scientists are able to kind of crunch those numbers, look at the trends, look at the data, look at the changes in populations distribution, all that kind of stuff. And that then informs conservation at broader level. So we provide information for government, for other conservation organizations, so they can put things in action. So we're the organization that are kind of combining all this amazing data and making it accessible to lots of different people who can do things active with it. So I was as a lifelong bird watcher. I used to do webs counts as a volunteer for many, many years, and I was a local organizer for Morecambe Bay South. And yeah, I've just always been connected to it, with other conservation organisations as well. And so I did work for the RSPB for a number of years, and then this job came up, and it just had my name written all over it. And so I thought I'm going to have to move from Lancashire all the way down to Norfolk because it's just the perfect job for me. And so far, so good.
So, what is your actual job title?
Well, I'm a media manager, which sounds a bit flouncy, really. I just want to do something a bit more kind of meaningful with myself.
Yeah.
What few skills I may have, I wanted to kind of put them into something worthwhile. Yeah, I've just always been connected to that whole bird thing and sharing information and kind of connecting with people and trying to engage with people and get them involved and get them inspired by the brilliance of birds.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking, I'm assuming your biggest challenge is reaching a wider audience. And I think that the thing is with the modern world, there is so many ways of accessing media, and that's really exciting. But on the flip side of that, I think there's the real fear that you will only speak to your echo chamber. And
Yeah,
that's comfortable, I think, early on. Like maybe when you're young or when you're really new to a topic, there's something safe and comfortable about being in an echo chamber that feels cozy, right?
yeah,
People
yeah.
think the same as you, they're excited like you are. But I don't think that sustains you. I think after a while, the real beauty of media and connection in general is nuance that sometimes even feels a little uncomfortable, causes a bit of friction, but allows you to kind of expand your view. Like one of my favorite bird watching experiences, and I'm much later in life to bird watching. I've always enjoyed nature. My family are outdoorsy, but in so much as, I'm from a city, I'm from Cardiff. My family we had dogs, we were always out walking. My parents appreciate things, but we're not like sit in a bird hide type family. I've started to do that as I was older and I had a camper van and I enjoyed being outside a lot. But I remember being at a wonderful bird hide and trying to find a bittern. And, I'd never heard of a bittern before for a start. I just saw it on the
Right.
board on my way in. I didn't know what it was. It looked really cool. And then, it turned out that other people in the hide that were really kind, they let me use their, scopes to look at things and they shared binoculars and just so welcoming. But that whole experience triggered this conversation with the people there that were enthusiastically telling me, you really need to come just before sunrise. That's when you're going to see this. And I'm a very open person. I have a podcast. I clearly like to talk. And I felt this discomfort when I realized, oh, I could just nod because they're giving me sage advice. But what's actually coming up for me is like a bit of regret and sadness that I don't feel like I can action their advice because, and I said this and I was tentative about it because I didn't want to sort of upset that comfortable sort of vibe that I was part of. And that you also feel like you've been accepted into, right? People have
Yeah.
let you be part of something, and then you're there going to be slightly awkward because I just said gently, oh, as somebody that's here on my own, I actually wouldn't do that. I
Yeah.
wouldn't walk through a enclosed sort of wooded area at dark hours because I
Mm.
would be genuinely afraid of harm befalling me. And
Yeah.
I could see that slight discomfort and then that relief when that point of view was just allowed to breathe. There was no immediate defensive, oh, well, don't be ridiculous. No one's like that here. The bird is worth it, or you just have to do these things. Like there was that kind of acknowledgement and that little space for, oh, right. I hadn't thought about that. And I was like, yeah, and I'm not angry that you haven't thought about it. I'm not, going down some spiral about
Oh,
this is all
yeah.
your privilege. But I am aware that sometimes conversations need that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we get stuck in this view that everything is as accessible for everyone. These things are really simple to understand. We're all on the same page because all of our friends are saying the same thing. And I think that with media, especially in anything to do with conservation or raising awareness and advocacy, trying to empower people to engage with conversations around nature and protecting our environment, being out of the echo chamber is really important. And this is a
Yeah.
very long-winded way of asking you. I've got a question for you. I have.
Right. Okay. Good.
I'm curious. What is there anything you're doing or that you've been involved with or that you're excited about in the pipeline that you think is trying to broaden who engages with your media or specific projects that the BTO are doing?
I mean, it is a massive, massive complex area, isn't it? I mean, I've always been into nature. I've always been into birds, as isolated in a sense, and probably more so in many ways, as being like, I was the only kid in my school, really, who was into it. So I had to kind of entertain myself with it, and it isn't cool, and it isn't this, and isn't that. I mean, I guess with the advent of social media, young people at least have that ability to create a connection with one another so they don't feel as isolated and as alone. I mean, I used to have to, try and convince my friends, school friends, to come out for a day out on, the nature reserve with me, and they'd be okay, but it was a passing interest for them. For me, it was absolutely essential to me to get out there and do it. And, it was very, very difficult to find like-minded people. And it's been that way throughout my life, really. I mean, I went off to art college and all that kind of stuff. And nobody was interested in birds. And I kind of lost my interest a little bit, the various things of adolescence that kind of steer you off in another direction for a bit. And I came back to it as a young adult. And then I started meeting people who'd come to it the same way I had as individuals. And then all of a sudden, there was this little group of about half a dozen of us. We're in our early 20s. We're all into kind of music as well, and we're all going out and doing this. And we kind of and the birding was part of that. And it felt like all of a sudden there was a real sense of community. But it's really, really hard to create that. You can't,
Yeah.
all the conservation organisations spend hours and hours and hours and lots of money trying to engage with new audiences, trying to broaden their appeal, trying to be accessible to as many people as possible. Now, you can do physical things on nature reserves to make them more physically accessible, so that it is more accessible to more people, perhaps with, kind of disability issues or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, trying to encourage people to suddenly decide that nature's great when they've had no interest in it, it's an impossible task.
Yeah.
I mean, Attenborough's been at it for decades, and still we're a kind of a minority. And I think, as far as passionate, kind of dedicated, hobbyists go, for an organisation like the BTO, it's a little bit difficult because we don't have those nature reserves. We don't have that public engagement facility where people will go and and have a day out and get to know us that way. So our members and supporters are already kind of there very often. And the
Yeah.
challenge for us is to increase that. We want more active participants. And they don't have to be experts. We do things like winter gull survey. Okay, you've got to be a pretty decent birder to be able to do that effectively. But things like nest record scheme and garden bird watch, these are things that we can really bring people into the organization, but also just into that broader sense of contributing towards science and conservation, which is really important. Because we're not, we don't have that same kind of outreach that the RSPB or the Wildlife Trusts do, for example, or National
Yeah.
Trust even. We are a body of scientists working away to produce this information. But people are absolutely at the core of that. They contribute to it and they make it work. So it's a challenge for us, certainly. And people don't really know about the BTO, who the BTO are, what they are, because we don't have that, that big showy kind of persona in a way that other organizations might have. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge. It's a tough one.
Well, I'm glad that you're taking part today because I feel like this is just one of those things, isn't it? Where just reaching a few other listeners that might not have heard of your work. That's tentative steps into making people realize that there's this place for them to sort of join. Without any further ado, I'm going to ask you, do you mind revealing who the character is for this episode, what type of bird it is, and then, if you don't mind, what drew you to this character?
Okay, well, I'll give you a clue. Like meep meep. That's a sound that it famously made in the Looney Tunes cartoons, and Roadrunner is my cartoon character of choice, and that's what kind of bird it is. It is a Roadrunner. There is actually a real bird called a Roadrunner, and it's maybe it doesn't look quite so much like the cartoon version, but there are parallels to the way that it kind of behaves in the cartoon. And some of the things that it gets up to with the real bird. And the thing as well that really draws me to it, I mean, as much as the fact that I love roadrunners, I mean, they're fantastic birds in so many ways. But also they're a member of the cuckoo family, which I think surprises many people.
Yes,
because we have our own, relationship with cuckoo in the UK and in Europe with our own, famous cuckoo. I think it's just a nice little connection, really, that you've got an iconic character from, a 60, 70-year-old cartoon, many of us have grown up with, at whatever age we are. And actually, it connects to a bird that we're doing lots of work with in the UK here as well. I'm just trying to understand better.
The iconic line, the meep meep, which I keep reading is beep beep, and I do not believe it is beep beep. It definitely sounds like meep meep to me.
It does to me too, yeah.
Yeah. So my first question is Roadrunners or cuckoos. You've already mentioned that I associate cuckoo with that, but with that sound, that cuckoo.
Yeah.
So Roadrunners, how likely is it that they would make a sound anything like meep meep?
Very unlikely. They don't sound anything like that. They have a really kind of low cooing kind of sound, which the first time I ever heard it in the wild, I didn't have a clue what it was. And yet I'd been listening to them, to prepare myself if I heard one. But when I actually heard it, it was what the earth? What on earth is that? And I found this cuckoo halfway up a mesquite tree, making this kind of weird, kind of low, deep cooing sound, which is its song. So yeah, nothing like meep meep. It's a very different thing altogether. And they also do quite a lot of bill clattering as well. They make quite yeah. So that's a sound you don't often hear, but they do that when they're involved in kind of communicating with one another and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, no beep beep or meep meep at all, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, I did assume that because not many birds try and sound like a car,
No. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I think they kind of just associate that because it's on the road and all the rest of it. So it was a nice little.
I read actually a lovely little thing about Roadrunner that I'm just going to share with you. I was thinking a lot about the cartoons because obviously I've been on a little spree in the last few days. I've been watching them and I'd forgotten how short they are. Like a lot of them are just a couple of minutes long. And I mean, that makes sense because the premise is so simple, isn't it? It's Coyote cannot catch the Roadrunner. I mean, you can't watch that on loop for ages. It's like one little skit, isn't it? But something that I read about this is that so the creator is Chuck Jones, right? And he actually came up with what he calls the Roadrunner rules. for the entire cartoon series. And
Right.
I really appreciated these because obviously these are a couple minute long episodes that seem to follow the same premise, and it's easy to be kind of dismissive about that. But quite a lot of thought and effort has obviously gone into it. And he sort of argued that a couple of things. The Roadrunner is not allowed to harm the coyote at all.
Right.
So all he's allowed to do is say beep beep or meep meep. There's not allowed to be any outside force that harms the coyote either. Apparently, it's always got to be his own ineptitude or the
Right.
failure of the Acme products. Next, and this was one of my favorite things about it, and I think actually I wasn't really a fan of Roadrunner as a kid. I much preferred Tom and Jerry. And interestingly, it was a parody of Tom and Jerry.
Oh,
He
really?
didn't know
Right.
that it was ever going to pick up the traction that it did.
Right.
Um, but he said that all action must be confined to the natural environment of the two characters. So it is very intentionally, continuously set in the Southwest American desert. And as a
Right.
kid, that was the appeal for me. I love the richness of those sort of orangey red rock
Yeah,
colors.
yeah, yeah.
So I really appreciated that. And I think as well, there's a weird romance about that undulating road that's as far as the eye can see that
Yeah.
really stuck with me because I've been to places like Utah and I've driven through Monument Valley and it is spectacular.
Mm.
I don't think that even watching it on TV or looking at the beautiful pictures can really communicate how profoundly stunning it is to be so immersed in that landscape. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's really beautiful that he commits to that. You know, he commits to that and shows you that throughout, and you don't get bored of it. And then he always said the coyote has got to be more humiliated than harmed by his own failures.
Yeah.
Um, the coyote is never allowed to give up his pursuit of the Roadrunner. And finally, and I actually cannot believe I'd never noticed this, and I was kicking myself because I've been rewatching the cartoons. The Roadrunner must always stay on the road, which
Oh, of course. Right.
makes
Yeah.
sense, but I
Yeah.
hadn't noticed it. And he was really specific about this because he said otherwise, logically, he would not be called a Roadrunner.
Right.
And I really like the fact that this kind of suggests that there was a strict creative guideline that he set for the series to try and maintain this consistency and humor. And, you know, the relevance of the character being in its natural setting. And I really, really just love the fact that it also ensured that Wile E. Coyote, who often ignored the rule of trying to trap him on the road, ends up failing anyway. Whereas the
Right.
Roadrunner is literally just using his speed down the road the entire time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciated that.
I always thought there was a little bit of naivety as well to the Roadrunners. If he didn't quite know what was going, he thought it was almost like a bit of a game. He used to just kind of pop up and go beep beep behind the coyote, as if
Yeah.
like, "Hey, how you doing?" You know, and he'd kind of turn up, and it wasn't as if he was trying to antagonize the coyote, but also it was like, "Hi, how you doing?" And it was only the coyote had this kind of absolute drive to do something about catching this thing, which I
Yeah.
always thought was kind of odd. It wasn't like Tom and Jerry, where it was
No,
deep, where Jerry was setting Tom up to fail.
no.
I don't think the Roadrunner ever seemed to sort of do that intentionally.
No, and it's also interesting because it's not a reciprocal relationship, is it? The
That's
Roadrunner
right.
is basically just existing. The Roadrunner is just existing on the road. And like you said,
Yeah.
got this curiosity of, oh, this thing's in my environment. And yeah, and I think that that's quite a nice, subtle difference. And I think it's really fascinating because my favorite piece of information that I'm going to sort of share is that I looked into this about the popularity of Roadrunner, and I thought it was just absolutely mind-blowing that essentially they decided that this cartoon and certain Looney Tunes cartoons in general would be sort of a really good way of connecting with other audiences. So during the Cold War, Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner cartoons were basically introduced to the Soviet audiences. So, as part of a broader cultural exchange program, right? Which means there was literally a diplomatic agreement that involved
Yeah.
Looney Tunes, which I just think is absolutely fabulous. Um, And the whole aim was to showcase aspects of American culture, but it was under the label of it being non-political entertainment, which makes sense, right? It's a kid's
Yeah, sure.
cartoon, it's a couple of minutes long, it's really simplistic. And this is just something I fundamentally do love about humans. It doesn't matter how simple you think something is, you cannot control the minds that it goes into. So this sort of throwaway piece of diplomacy ended up being really caught onto by the Soviet population. And cultural critics basically embrace these cartoons as a subtle critique of American society. And when I read that, I was like, oh, of course, because Wile E. Coyote, who is literally reliant, and in the creator's own words, is reliant on, trying to use Acme Corporation's over-engineered yet consistently defective gadgets. He ended up being interpreted as a symbol of like the American industrial hubris and inefficiency. And then the Roadrunner, who, like you said, is not being cruel. He's just trying
No,
to exist. The Roadrunner, who is there triumphing through agility rather than, using brute force, gets to be celebrated as an allegory of the triumph of nature or simplicity, like over industrial excess. Oh, I just thought it's so
it's
incredible.
extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I just thought it
All
was
the tools at the disposal during the Cold War to try and manipulate and kind of change the way that people thought about things. It's just
yeah,
it's amazing that Roadrunner was part of that. It's
I
incredible.
know. And I was thinking a lot, and I'm going to ask you about this in a moment about the Roadrunner using the road and how accurate this is, because that's, I guess, his weapon of choice is just maybe staying on the road. But Wile E. Coyote, I looked at a list and there were so many outlandish things. Like, and I saw this episode and really thought it was funny. He has painted tunnels, uh, and he tries to use decoys. He's got portable holes. He's got these Acme earthquake pills, which are meant to destabilize the whole terrain, but he accidentally ends up consuming them himself. He's got a do-it-yourself tornado kit, jet-powered roller skates, rocket skis. And I just think that was so fun. And my
Yeah.
favorite is also Acme instant icicles, which, is just absolutely ridiculous in that environment. So, compared to his outlandish efforts, the Roadrunner just utilizes his speed and the road. Can you break it to the audience? How likely is a Roadrunner to be on tarmac roads?
Well, it's actually you've got a fairly decent chance of seeing one on a tarmac road if you're traveling around those desert roads. I mean, they're not on them all the time by any stretch. They're usually in the kind of scrubby sides of the roads. I mean, basically what they're doing is they're looking for food like any other bird most of the time. They're stomping around the place looking for lizards and snakes and spiders and a bit of vegetation as well. But they're hunting most of the time. And so the roads are a nice open, warm space for them to be able to search along. So I've seen them on roads many times. But then also when you stop and you're walking in desert or you're birding around desert areas, you'll also come across them in the kind of more brushy areas and things like that. Where there are other things as well. So yeah, I mean, if you're driving in Arizona or California or New Mexico or Texas, all these places where they occur in the Southwest, you've got a good chance of seeing a roadrunner on a road, either running across it or kind of working its way along the edges looking for food. So yeah, they do use them. I mean, I guess that's why they acquired that name very early on. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. I mean, it is nice, isn't it, when the namesake isn't completely off base? Because sometimes there are things where you're like, oh, that's a terrible name for that. That's just such a weird misconception. Okay. And what about the speed of a roadrunner? Are they particularly fast?
They're pretty fast. I mean, they're not as fast as a coyote though. Coyote can easily outrun them, but they can run faster than a person. So, yeah, 20 odd kilometers an hour, I suppose they can get up to, whereas a coyote can go way faster than that. So yeah, I mean, a coyote is definitely an absolute predator
Yeah.
of roadrunners, as are cougars and
Yeah.
bobcats and lynx and all the other things out there, and also some of the larger hawks will take them as well. So yeah, I mean, the actual relationship between the two animals is not that far fetched. Coyotes would be hunting um, roadrunners out in the desert there. So yeah, it's definitely something you'd want to keep an eye on.
In terms of a different type of prey for a coyote, a bird prey, is there a bird that they could have picked that wasn't a roadrunner that might have been faster or a better sort of challenge? Or do you like the choice of
The
the road?
choice is great. I think the choice is great. I mean, it's kind of, as you were saying before, you're describing that landscape. It's an iconic bird of that landscape. Some of the other birds that live in that world wouldn't be quite so characterful. There is something about roadrunners, is even though they don't look like the cartoon much, they're still an extraordinary looking bird, and they are a favourite of the people in that region. They are deemed to be iconic of that landscape. I mean, if you think about the whole of North America, obviously they're restricted to that. So coyotes occur all over the North American continent. So there probably are bits of, yeah, but who would you really have a cartoon called Ruffed Grouse or or something like that? It just doesn't work. Roadrunner's got, it sounds good, doesn't it? But no, I think the Roadrunner is absolutely perfect for that kind of cat and mouse type of setup, really, because it's on the deck. It doesn't fly around. It's a feasible feast for the coyote. It could get it if it got it right. It could catch it. Whereas if a bird just flew off every time a coyote came after it, then it's a bit of a dead end. So I
Yeah.
think the fact that it's a ground dweller, I mean, they can fly. They just choose not to most of the time. I think that's its strength, and the very fact that it is odd looking, and that people often surprised to find out there's even a bird called a roadrunner that actually exists in real life.
Yeah.
I think it's just beautifully kind of, yeah, it just works really well, I think.
What are the big differences between the way that Roadrunner looks in the cartoon and they look in real life?
Well, they're not, I mean, the cartoon's quite long-legged and upright, isn't it? And
Yeah.
also quite colourful. And yeah, it's got quite a shortish bill and all. But whereas a real roadrunner is more kind of like an elongated chicken. They're kind of
Okay.
low slung, very long-tailed. They kind of lean forward. They've got a long bill. Mostly, I mean, when you see them, they're kind of brown, mottled kind of looking things. But they do have a nice purpley sheen to some of the feathers and stuff. And they've got this like bare patch of skin behind the eye, which has got lovely blue colours to it. So they are, they're really smart. They've got a crest, they've got kind of a long
Yeah.
bill, they've got a staring eye. And something I really like about them actually is that they've got these. We know that woodpeckers have what we call zygodactyl feet, where they've got two toes pointing one way, two pointing the other way. Oh, now it's a lot of sense to why a woodpecker would have that moving up and down trees for stability.
Oh, of
But
course.
yeah, but roadrunners also have that. So it's like an X shape. The footprint is like an X shape. Now that's partly they spend a lot of time on the ground, so obviously that's again better for running around on the ground. But it's also kind of a tool for catching snakes and lizards and things like that. It makes them more dexterous in the foot. But what's really interesting is because it's like an X, you don't know which direction the bird has gone in when you see the footprints.
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah, and so some of the kind of southern U.S. Native American tribes, indigenous tribes, kind of they thought it was a kind of a sacred bird and things like that, and they thought that they used that X of the footprint as a kind of to ward off evil because it didn't know which way you were going. It was like a kind of a mystery. It was to throw off the scent of
Ah.
evil spirits, which is great. I mean, it's just a cool thing. Now, actually, I've not looked at the cartoon to see whether the cartoon has zygodactyl feet or not. I don't know whether it's got 3 points in one way and one back or what. I need to
I
investigate that.
know. I don't feel like it does, but then I feel like a lot of the time, I'm going to try and do something that you can see, and then obviously no one else can see. But I'm sort of rotating my hands around each other. I feel like they make the Roadrunner's feet a lot of the time look like they're spinning, like they're almost real
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
kick up the dust. So I
Yeah.
wonder if, but then you do see him still. So
Mm.
I haven't spotted that, but that's for the listeners
That's a
to.
little job for us to do later,
I
isn't it?
know, I know. I'm going to be like Googling what do Roadrunners look
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Interesting about the feet because obviously we we all feel for the long-suffering kiwi.
Mm.
It's obviously a ground-dwelling bird. Am I right in saying that the kiwi does not benefit from feet like this?
Do you know? I don't know. I don't know what kiwi feet are like. I've got a feeling they're quite stumpy and
Yeah.
three at the front and one at the
Well,
back. Well,
I
yeah,
remember I went to
foot.
New Zealand and I saw kiwis not in the wild, unfortunately. And I remember that one of the things that I learned about them is that their feet are about a third of the weight of their body. So they're quite they're heavy and they're flappy.
Mm,
I'm pretty
right.
sure that they're three and that they
Mm.
just slap around, making them
Yes, that
really
sounds
easy
about
to
right.
target, which is obviously really sad. And maybe
Well,
it's
it seems to work for them, you know.
yeah, well, until we released ridiculous predators. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, okay, that's really interesting. We've talked a lot about Roadrunner, obviously, because that is the point of the episode. However, you mentioned something right at the start about the British cuckoos. So Roadrunners and cuckoos come from the same family. Is that correct?
Yeah, broadly, they're part of the same family. The cuckoo family is quite a big family. I mean, they're broken up into small groups within that. But yes, they are a type of cuckoo essentially, and they're one of 144 species of cuckoo across the
Oh,
world.
wow.
Yeah, yeah.
How similar, or I assume dissimilar, is the Roadrunner from our more commonly known British cuckoos?
Yeah, pretty different. I mean, they don't look alike. They don't really have too many behavioral traits that would link them. Um, I mean, our cuckoos are famously, they lay their eggs in other birds' nests and don't have any part in rearing the young. Most roadrunners do their own nests and do raise their own young. Though they have been known, apparently, to lay eggs in other species' nests. And
Oh,
I don't know how often that happens. I'm not quite sure how successful that is, but they generally tend to. So they do build their own nest, which our cuckoos don't, of course. But it's a fairly scrappy affair, quite low down, only about maybe less than a meter off the ground or so.
okay.
So because they're ground dwelling birds, unlike many ground dwelling birds, they don't nest on the ground. They actually build a little nest just slightly elevated, which is probably good in the desert because there's an
Yeah.
awful lot of things around eating eggs and chicks. So it's probably not a bad idea to elevate it out, position in a nice thorny bush or something like that. But
Okay.
yeah, they're very different birds. I mean, obviously, also, roadrunners don't really fly much, so they don't migrate. So there's none of that. Whereas, obviously, our cuckoos are famously long distance migrants that breed here in the summer and migrate all the way through Europe, across the Mediterranean, across the Sahara into central Africa for the winter. So very, very different lifestyles. Yeah.
So why are they in the same family?
I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, I guess there'll have been a common ancestor at some point from which all these things evolved. I mean, all the New World cuckoos, which is those in North and South America, they have a similarity. They're long-tailed things. They kind of creep around in trees. They're kind of very often they're quite long-looking birds. They're quite different to the European and the African and Asian cuckoos often. But there is a bit of a mix over where you get into the Australias and Southeast Asia. They start looking a little bit alike. Some of the coals and the cuckoos, these birds don't look like our cuckoos. But I think it's only about 50 odd or 60 of the whole cuckoo family of those 144 that actually do the brood parasite thing where they lay their eggs in other birds' nests. So a lot of cuckoos do raise their own those in the family. But you think of something like a great spotted cuckoo. I don't know if you're familiar with that breeds in southern Europe,
No.
and that's quite a big bird, and that lays its eggs in things like magpie nests and the nests of azure-winged magpies. And that actually looks a bit more like the long-tailed, kind of long,
Mhm.
spotty cuckoo. Yeah, they are quite varied bunch. The smallest cuckoo is only about the size of a sparrow.
Oh,
Little,
really?
little bronze cuckoo, I think it's called. You get those in Australia and South Indonesia and places like that, and they're tiny. And yet the biggest one, can be 80 centimeters. I mean, a big chunk of a thing. So they're a pretty diverse bunch of birds, really.
I have a couple of follow-up questions on this. Um, this is going to seem like an outlandish question, but I'm going to pose it to you anyway.
Okay.
Why do other birds raise cuckoo chicks? Because I don't understand how I have seen videos of birds that are actually smaller than a cuckoo chick
Hmm. Hmm.
feeding the cuckoo chick. Surely that bird, many of which are clever enough to migrate, survive great hardship. How does it not realize that that is not his chick? Or are they essentially very comfortable with communal living, and maybe they are aware of it and they just want to help this chick survive.
There's a philosophical way of looking at it and also a practical way of looking at it. And I think what happens really is that the imperative of any parent bird in the breeding season is to raise the chick that you have. Now, cuckoos come in and they lay eggs which are brilliant mimics of the host species egg. So a
Yeah.
reed warbler, for example, will come back to its nest and it won't really be able to tell that there's a wrong egg in there. It looks like its own egg. And as these birds, the young cuckoos hatch fairly quickly, they shove out the other eggs or the other
Yeah.
chicks. So they're the only one. Now that happens, obviously through predation and other reasons. Chicks will die and eggs will be kind of ineffective. So birds are just used to feeding that one that's got the big mouth in front of it, and that's its chick. That's all it thinks about. I am here to do this job of raising the next generation. It will not have any clue that this isn't its own chick. It will not be able to process that or make that decision. It will just continue to feed it. And it won't even realize that when its chick is, 4 times the size of it, begging that it's not its chick. It's just, as far as it's concerned, that's all it is. It is its chick. And it's an amazing thing. I mean, it's extraordinary that these birds are able to, to do that. And it allows the cuckoos to be able to move around a little bit and lay in multiple nests. So actually, it's actually quite an effective way of doing it. There are other birds as well, other than the cuckoos, that do brood parasitism. Cowbirds in North America, they do it in,
Yeah.
what American warbler nests and things like that. And they used to follow herds of buffalo. That's why they're called cowbirds. And so they didn't stay in one place to breed. So the reason why it's an effective method for them is because they can lay their egg, clear off, follow the buffalo, lay an egg wherever the buffalo get to next, and they can keep doing that. So they don't have to stay in one place. As the buffalo moved away on migration, they weren't isolated from the cattle or the buffalo. They followed them. So they're able to do this. There are just so many awe-inspiring things that birds do, and brood parasitism is just phenomenally, complex and interesting. Cuckoos, our cuckoos don't do that though. It's just a weird thing that cuckoos do.
I can't get my head around it at all. I whenever I think about this topic, I don't know if it's just because it makes me uncomfortable, because obviously, and it's, I guess it's in the name about, this idea of something being a parasite immediately. So as somebody who has suffered with parasites while being in South America, I feel very strongly about this
You've been that
invasive
host, yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to be the host. I did not consent to this. But I think it's also the beautiful, bizarre complexity of it, because like with most things, when you're introduced to those ideas, you get the broad strokes, right? So that you can
Yeah,
secure the knowledge. And the broad strokes is, oh, they lay their egg there, and then the other parent raises it. But then you start thinking about things like you've mentioned, like, well, how does that happen? Well, when they push out the other chicks, but the egg mimicry is absolutely fascinating to me because, and maybe this is a silly incoming question for you. Can an individual cuckoo, through its egg laying life, lay eggs that mimic multiple other birds' eggs?
a great question, and it's something I've pondered many, many times. I believe that's not the case. I'm fairly certain that the evidence is that most cuckoos specialize in their host species. So
Right.
you'll get ones that do reed warblers, you'll get ones that do meadow pipits. There must be some occasional switching because they do lay in a number of different species
Yeah.
nests, and they can't all be specialists. I don't think. Without saying that, I don't know. I mean, there are people certainly in the building I'm sat in now who probably answer that better than I can. But yeah, they do tend to be specialists. And what we've seen as well also is that there have been declines in certain UK populations of cuckoos. So the ones that are breeding in the uplands in the north in particular still seem to be doing reasonably well, whereas those in the southern parts of in England and well, particularly England, the lowlands, and then the lowlands of Wales and stuff, their numbers are going down. They're declining quite rapidly.
Okay.
So there's this whole question: is it to do with the host species? Is it to do with the breeding conditions of the landscape? Is there food enough in the breeding season for their hosts to raise their young? Is it something happening on their migration route? Is it something happening in their wintering grounds? Which is why the BTO has been doing this long-term study into cuckoo migration in particular to try and understand what happens. And what we did discover initially was that the ones that are doing better in the UK, the breeding birds that tend to live longer and come back and make successful migrations backwards and forwards, use an eastern route through Italy, Greece, and into Africa that way. The
Okay.
ones that are in decline mostly took a western route through Spain. So we're then able to sort of say, okay, well, that's interesting. What's
Mm.
causing that? Is it because the route they're going, it's not as sustainable for them during the migration period? They can't find enough food, or is it weather patterns that's changing there? Is it the expansion of the Sahara? All these things that could be impacting on that and their ability to survive fit and well into the winter, and then reverse when they come back. What are they meeting? How are the conditions that they're kind of, as springs are changing through climate change
Yeah.
and all that, and the timings, they may be in good shape when they leave, but when they arrive, they're missing the window of opportunity. So there's lots and lots of research going on. BTO has been doing loads of satellite tagging of cuckoos since 2011, and it's just throwing up some phenomenal information that hopefully will allow us to understand better and then conserve the birds. But it's such a risky strategy, isn't it? You're
Yeah.
migrating a long way through all sorts of different conditions, and then you've got to find your host species when you get there who will
Yeah.
raise your young. I mean, there's a lot of complexities in in the whole workings of this thing.
Well, I, I think as well, part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast is I really believe that you touched on earlier Attenborough and how, he's tried to get us engaged with the natural world. And he's obviously been very successful with that. I also think that childhood is fundamentally important to laying the groundwork for people's interest in
Absolutely.
nature. And that's why, it might sound like a throwaway topic to look at birds in pop culture, but I don't think it is. I think a lot of people's, formational experiences and attachment to the natural world can come from things they watch as
Yeah.
a child.
It's
Um,
gateway, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And, I like it that Roadrunner is a really good example of this. Roadrunner has been around for decades. And yet in 2012, the US National Park Service made Roadrunner an official honorary mascot for desert conservation campaigns, specifically trying to raise awareness for speed limits in wildlife areas, which obviously is kind of funny.
Yeah.
His face was plastered all over these like highway signs, reading things like "Slow down, this is Roadrunner country." But my question about this is within the cuckoo family itself, is there one that we should be worrying about more than the Roadrunner? Or what I would really appreciate is here in the UK, or, where I'm from in Wales,
Yeah.
should we be doing a similar campaign? And if so, is there a sort of British equivalent that we could be using? Obviously, it's not going to have the Roadrunners Looney Tunes background, but is there one that we should be highlighting the plight of? Is there a way that we could be embracing this sort of love of members of the cuckoo family and trying to raise awareness? Where would we
Well, I mean, it would be great. I mean, I like to think that BTO is pretty much doing that through its cuckoo project. Really, I mean, cuckoos are in a terrible state. I mean, since 1995, UK population of cuckoos has declined by about 30%. So that's quite significant in a relatively short period of time, and we need to do something about that. We need to understand it. So that's why we've tagged like more than 120 cuckoos so far with these satellite tags to kind of track. I mean, the sad reality is, every bird that dies gives us as much information as the one that survives because it tells us,
Mhm.
what's going on out there. And while cuckoos are they could be the poster boy for this kind of, we've got so many. This is a sad thing, to be honest, Kelly. Turtle doves, 98%
Mhm.
declines. Starlings, 80 odd percent declines. Familiar
Yeah.
household birds really are having a really, really tough time. And we're still not really able to get that across, no matter how much we talk about it and how much we champion it, because people have other things going on in their lives and they just don't, for many people, it's just not that relevant to them. And that's a horrible place for us to be in, because we
Yeah.
know how much we care about nature, how much we care about the future of bird life, and how much joy it can bring, and how much we want people to be able to, share that. It's really difficult. We don't have that kind of one species that everyone's familiar with enough, I don't think. I mean, if robins started declining massively, and maybe
Yeah.
we'd have a bit of a chance of saying something useful, because everybody, well, I read a thing the other day. It said 25% of teenagers couldn't identify a robin.
A
Well,
robin.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
which again, these are all these things, and things like, mute swan, robin. Most people, the duck in the duck pond,
yeah.
I suppose if something like that catastrophically happened to those species, we might be able to do something about it. But it's a real challenge. I mean, the great thing about the Cuckoo Project and other things that we do is that people donate to it, and you can watch the map, you can watch the migration of these things. You can go on our website and actually in real time, you go on it today and you can see where they all are in the Congo and in Angola and
Oh,
so on.
that's
And come
wonderful.
February, they'll start moving, and you'll see it on the map as they start moving through the Sahara, whether they go east or west, which way they come back to the UK. And they won't all make it. One might just stop in the Sahara and just not transmit anymore and you just know that it's perished,
Yeah.
and you might be able to look at a weather map and see that there's a catastrophic storm somewhere or something like that, and people get really, really into it and they get
Yeah.
behind it. So the people who follow the Cuckoo map are really, really obsessed with it. So I think we have a chance to do things using that kind of technology,
Mhm.
but we need to get more people looking at it and
Yeah.
enjoying it and kind of following it and doing it for more species, because ultimately there's lots and lots of great info out there, and lots of fascinating stuff going on that we want to really kind of get people involved in and sharing. We've been tracking things like nightjars and nightingales as well, and because nightjars are unusual birds, people have a kind of a curiosity about them. Things like nightingale, everyone's heard of a nightingale. So, if we can use these species that have some kind of folklore, iconography, or something
Mm.
attached to them, familiarity, that's the best way for us to do things for the broader kind of natural world, I think.
Some animals are just considered sexy, right? You are specializing in bird conservation, and you can feel that unfortunately sometimes people want to hook their interest into something cute or familiar,
Mm-hmm.
whereas it's not, that just isn't happening, or it shouldn't be the thing that needs to drag people in, because you want people to care from the offset about the decimation of wildlife.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's easier to raise money for a puffin than it is a fenrir after spider. But I mean, but if if you can generate enough money from the puffin, and to then trickle down and do all the other work you need to do, then that's great. But it is tricky. I mean, people are, they're only going to really respond to something they're familiar with or that they care about, they have some
Yeah.
connection to. If
Yeah.
you're trying to sort of say, oh, help us protect this thing you've never heard of and may never see, it's a really hard sell. How do you convince
Yeah.
people to care for these things, wherever they are in the UK, and we have these challenges constantly within the conservation sector, how to get people on board to support the things that we feel are important. They might not be showy and glamorous, but they're still equally as important as anything else.
So if anyone was listening that wanted to find a way of getting involved that sort of was accessible or they hadn't considered, what do you think you would suggest?
We have these kind of very, detailed surveys that people can get involved in, but you kind of, you need to be skilled at bird identification to a degree and be able to dedicate X amount of time to things. And not everybody has that. We get that. And there are thousands of people who do, and it's absolutely amazing what they contribute. But, we also have, we do have a garden BirdWatch scheme, which is a year-round thing where somebody can spend a little bit of time every week just telling us, what's in their garden. And that helps us build up a year-round, constant picture. So we've got thousands of people involved in that, but we'd like way, 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 way more, because some birds are declining in gardens, some birds are increasing in gardens, and we want to be able to see where those areas are, where the distribution is changing, populations are changing, where the impacts may be, and things like the nest record scheme that people can do themselves. They can let us know about that blackbird nest in their garden. How many young came off it, whether any young came out at all. That's all really, really useful information. So people go onto the BTO's website, and there's a page that's just got all our surveys on all the things that people can do to get
Okay.
involved and contribute to. There's got to be something for absolutely everybody at every level of interest there. And it's just a great way of becoming a genuine citizen scientist and helping us build a really good picture for the future.
I love that phrase as well. I think citizen scientist is so beautiful. It's just exactly what you want. You want more people to be involved, and therefore formalizing a process for them to be involved is a really powerful thing. And I think it really speaks to the values of the organization as well. This idea that yes, you want scientific papers and you want specialism and you want facts, but equally you can encompass a wider range of people to participate in that. And that's what we need. And I think it's really important. I do have a query on the Nest record scheme or the garden watch. If you don't have a garden, can people be involved like with their local park? Like if the people spend a lot of time in sort of wildlife areas, is that something that they could sort of document?
Yeah, I mean, the Nest Record Scheme, certainly. I mean, the Garden Bird Watch is specifically around gardens. We're trying to see how
Yeah,
valuable these green spaces are within
right.
urban and suburban
Okay.
environments. So we want in a very specific set of data from that. But Nest Record Scheme, yeah, I mean, if you've got a nest anywhere, if you know where there's a nest, you can contribute to that, and it can help us see what's going on all over the place. So yeah, I mean, this is it. I mean, we realise that not everybody has the luxury of a garden, but they still want to participate. And they may be able to contribute some information to us that nobody else is contributing because they're keeping their eyes out, they're seeing what's out there. As you say, there could be somebody, taking the dog for a walk every day to the local park or whatever, and has noticed a blackbird building a nest, has noticed a long-tailed tit building a nest.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about it. That's great. That's really good stuff. Yeah.
I think it's important to remind people of that as well, because again, it's that instinctive thing of, oh, this isn't for me then. Oh, I can't participate in that. But I think it's nice that that flexibility exists because a lot of people do have their regular walks or things that they're aware of.
Yeah.
And often for years, there are places in my local parks where I'll think, oh, they're back at that site again. And that
Yeah.
wasn't even intentional. You've just acquired that knowledge over
Yeah.
repeated behavior of visiting the place. So yeah, I think that's really nice to call out.
That's a really good point, though. That I mean, the very fact is that you would notice it anecdotally, and that goes unrecorded.
Yeah.
That information, is not out there. But if we can encourage people to sort of think, oh, I'll pop that on the website when I get home, over a period of time, you may observe changes in that, and the participant themselves will go, oh yeah, I remember like 4 years ago there were six pairs there. There's only three now,
Yes.
or the other way around. And it allows you to go and revisit your own experiences as well, which is it kind of does build that sense of interest and awe, and it's a great way of getting people really involved because they feel like they can see the value of their own information.
Okay. So before we conclude, I thought that we could maybe discuss a couple of interesting things about Roadrunners because,
Okay.
he is our star. Keep saying he, and I feel really bad because I guess,
Yeah, we don't know, do we?
yeah, no, and especially as a woman, I should not just be by default assuming that, Roadrunner is male. Although I think Wile E. Coyote is male. And I don't feel any guilt about that. But
That's just
clearly,
because he's evil. You're just making
yeah,
an
I know.
assumption.
I'm like, oh, it's the evil man chasing it. But I kind of think it's probably progressive that I haven't assumed it is a woman. Like he's just chasing the woman around. I just think they're both men being ridiculous. So I wondered if you had any sort of interesting Roadrunner facts that we could tell our audience about. You mentioned that they attack snakes. I
Hmm.
mean,
They
how?
can pretty much handle anything. I mean, they will eat snakes, rattlesnakes. They will. They sometimes do it in pairs. They will kind of one will sort of distract the snake, and the other one will kind of stab at it at the back of the head and things like that, and get it. And sometimes if they take a snake, if they kill a snake and they start eating it, and it's too long for them to swallow in one go, they will kind of just wander around with half a snake dangling out of the mouth, while bits of it being digested. And as it digests, they eventually take the whole snake down, which is rather extraordinary. But they eat tarantulas as well and scorpions. So all the things that you kind of, are supposed to kind of keep well out of the way over in the desert are absolutely no fear
Is
for a
this
roadrunner.
just opportunistic? Is this just because of the environment they're in? They need to take what they can get, or would they still tackle something like a snake even if they had other options?
I guess, yeah, I don't think they really think of it that way. They see something moving and they think, well, there's food, you know. And,
Oh, well,
I mean, the other thing, yeah, I mean, and the other thing, of course,
fine,
with
fine.
living in, you know, they are opportunists, and that's it. They will eat all manner of invertebrates, insects, frogs, mice, baby birds of other species, you know, toads, lizards, everything they can possibly get, beetles, a lot. But because there's very little access to water, of course, if you live in the desert, so they
Mm.
get most of their water through these animals that they eat, because through the blood and through the other, kind of
Oh.
liquids contained within these animals. So it's a great way for them to kind of keep hydrated in the desert heat as well.
Yes, and I read that they often eat their prey whole,
Yeah,
including the bones.
yeah.
But I thought there was this really lovely little observation about how, in some cases, roadrunners have even been seen grabbing hummingbirds out of the air mid-flight. And the commenter wrote, a move Wile E. Coyote could only dream of. Which I thought when I read this, because I was reading an account of somebody who'd been watching Roadrunners and sort of gathering information, and I thought that is so telling that
Yeah.
this person has dropped in a Wile E. Coyote reference. It's just somebody who is, taking their time to observe Roadrunners, but that has stuck with them, and I think that
Totally.
that
Yeah.
is really interesting. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it's lovely, isn't it, that a cartoon like that has introduced, people to an actual, relationship between wild animals in that hostile environment, the coyote and the roadrunner, and for people to kind of make those connections constantly, which is great. I mean, that's just a great way of kind of having people connect with nature somehow through some contemporary reference that may not even kind of connect with them in any other way. It's just great,
yeah.
you know.
I
Yeah.
also think I appreciate the fact that Wile E. Coyote is not terrifying. Because even though he obviously is kind of like the baddie, because he is trying
Yeah.
to get the road running the entire time, he's so ineffective that we can't help but sort of not root for him to win, but we enjoy his capers, right? And I think that
Yeah.
that's nice as well, because obviously there's a lot of fear around animals like coyotes. There's a lot,
Mm.
pack animals, a lot of the noise that they make, this idea of it being, this predator. And I think it's quite a nice choice to have him constantly failing and sort of taking some of that, what could be quite frightening, away and just sort of letting it be a cute
Yeah.
just character.
Maybe it says something also about sort of humans' approach to predators as well, kind of sort of almost kind of demeaning it, because we have a kind of a fearful relationship ourselves with things like that, particularly out in those parts of the world where
Yeah,
there are wolves and coyotes and things like that, because ranchers don't like them and all the rest of it, and they are sadly, persecuted quite widely, wherever they are. And maybe by turning it into some sort of feeble, pathetic creature,
yeah,
it's part of that process of kind of undermining it slightly in their own minds, But coyotes are really quite smart animals. They're great, and again, they're opportunists. They just wander around trying to find what on earth they can to
yeah.
eat, and they will take just about anything. But they're a cool animal, they're really smart, and
I
they're
like
really.
coyotes. I think I really enjoyed when I was going down my Soviet rabbit hole about the popularity. I thought it was quite sad that they also saw him as the symbol of the unattainable American dream. Like, I know it's a ridiculous stretch, but there is something kind of humbling about seeing it that way and thinking, oh, yeah, he's trying so hard. He embraces everything the corporations sell him. And
Yeah.
he's just got one aim. That's it. He's got one aim
Yeah.
to be successful in this one thing. And no matter how hard he tries or how resilient he is, he just never ever gets there. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, the
I
coyote.
know. I remember as a child thinking, if he's got the money to buy this stuff from Acme, why don't he just buy some food? That would just solve
Well,
his problems straight away, wouldn't it? He
I
wouldn't have to
know.
catch rid of them, But that was the kind of slight twisted logic of a 9-year-old, I suppose.
No, I like it. I think it's quite an
It's just
intelligent.
what I would have done. I think the lazy me thought, why don't you
Yeah.
just buy some food, mate?
No, done with this. This is a ridiculous endeavor. Well, he wants the pride, doesn't he, of saying he achieved it. To
I
keep
guess so. Yeah, that's
participating in
what.
the rat race.
Yeah, I also did used to kind of root for the bad guys in most of those cartoons. I never liked Tweety Pie. I always wanted
No.
Sylvester to win. I didn't really like Jerry. I always wanted Tom to get him.
Yeah.
But with Roadrunner and Coyote, I always felt a kind of an equal match with them, and
Yeah.
I just enjoyed the kind of the challenge, that each one was having to go and endure. And I
Yeah.
thought yeah, they were great. Just a really great cartoon, and yeah, really good fun. And introduced me to the Roadrunner, of course. I didn't know
Yeah.
what one was. I watched a cartoon as a child, so yeah.
Do you remember I'm sorry, I'm going to phrase that again. Do you remember your first encounter with a Roadrunner?
A real one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do actually. I was fortunate enough in my mid-teens to go to the US on a family holiday, and yeah, we saw them out near Grand Canyon, and I was blown away. I mean, it was just, I mean, as a bird obsessed teen anyway, everything was amazing out there. But that was one of those ones, and one of the ones I really wanted to see because
Yeah.
it is an icon of the desert, of the southern southwest deserts, and you see the pictures of it all over the place. And then when I actually saw one, it was just amazing. And the whole car, I think my mum saw it first. It started running across the road, and she shouted,
Oh,
"Roadrunner!" And we all, wow, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience, and I'm very fortunate. I've seen them many times since, and I just terrific, terrific birds. Really got bags of character, and I love the fact that they're related to cuckoos. So every time I see a cuckoo here, or hear a cuckoo here, there's that little link. It's just great. It's really lovely. Yeah.
I've never seen one, so I hope to see one in the future. Oh, well, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's
Very
been
well.
really lovely. I will put some links in the episode description.
But no, that's been really nice. It's been great, great fun.
Elliot explains. Why do birds hum?
Why?
Because scientists think they can't remember the words.
Very good.